and for taking us inside that courtroom. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
A lot to break down now on that historic decision by that jury today, and joining me to do just that is trial attorney and legal analyst Kelly Hyman. It's great to have you back on BBC News. I just want to ask you, first of all, what stood out to you about today's verdict in that Manhattan courtroom?
It's a historic day, and we have to remember this is the first time in U.S. history where a former president of the United States has been charged and convicted of felony crimes. That really stood out. And the fact that the jury really took their time, very methodically, asking for evidence back, asking for certain things, that they really thought about this and understood that this was going to be a monumentous decision on their part.
Were you surprised at all? I mean, you said they took their time, but in the end, it was only a couple of days, wasn't it, in terms of deliberations? Was that about the amount of time you thought they'd spend on this?
I thought it was going to go till Friday and then Friday, but I did predict, and they have me on the tape on CNN saying that I believed that it was going to be convicted on all 34 counts.
Wow. So just walk us through, I mean, briefly, but 34 counts. What is the legal significance of the actual verdict that was handed down? There could be jail time, there could be fines, it could be a mix.
Right. And people always ask, like, what's next? What's going to happen? So we know the judge has set the sentencing for July 11th, right? And that's when, at that time, the judge will sentence Donald Trump. And at that point in time, he will be a convicted felon. He is not a convicted felon until then. But in the meantime, before that happens, they will most likely, defense counsel, Trump's team, will file a motion to set aside the verdict. And that could potentially delay the sentencing in the case.
And just to be clear, that kind of motion is different from an appeal.
Correct. So that motion to set aside the verdict would potentially happen before the fact of the sentencing, right? In between that. So most likely the sentencing time, if that happens, will get delayed, right? That will get pushed back. And then once the sentencing happens and he is convicted, becomes a convicted felon, and the judge issues the punishment that we talked about, whether jail time, which is probably unlikely, or the fact that he has some kind of probation, then at that point, his attorneys can file an appeal.
And we've seen many of those sorts of tactics to push back a timeline has been very successful in many of the other criminal cases facing Donald Trump. Let's talk about the sentencing. A lot of this, isn't it, or nearly all of it, comes down to the discretion of the judge in this case, Juan Merchan. What do you expect to happen if, indeed, we see that sentencing taking place on July 11th?
So going back in June, both sides have to give the court a memo, basically a sentencing memo laying out what they think, right? So from the defense, no sentencing, and then for the state, depending on what they feel is appropriate, whether it is jail time or some kind of probation, and then ultimately the judge will consider that. Also, in the meantime, Donald Trump has to go to the probation office. He has to sit for an interview where they discuss with him, and they also issue a report. Ask him about, his job prospects. We all know what his job prospects
are. He's aiming for a pretty big job, isn't he?
Right. Yes, he is, and talk to him, about that. And then they issue a report as well, and then ultimately it'll be the judge's discretion, but most likely, due to Trump's age, 77 years old, this is a first-time offender. Most likely, I do not see any jail time.
All right, well, that's really interesting stuff, and that is the kind of the timeline that we can expect there. Kelly Hyman, trial attorney and legal analyst, always great to have your thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you.